Today we're exposing many names that you have yet to hear involved with the Epstein files. I'm really excited about this one because there are some people that you had no idea were actually affiliated with Jeffrey Epstein. Let's dive in.
A monster like Jeffrey Epstein did not operate alone. His illegal trafficking enterprise was built around celebrities who never thought they'd be exposed. And after 3.5 million documents were publicized revealing the inner workings of the most disturbing criminal operation in modern history, celebrities are praying they won't be mentioned in this video. But nobody's safe.
Love that.
While names like Elon Musk, Bill Clinton, and President Donald Trump were expected to be in the files, there were a ton of shocking names that nobody expected. So in this video, I want to focus on the celebs that were connected to Jeffrey Epstein that nobody seems to be talking about. From the ones that claim they did nothing more than take a picture, to others that were deeply entangled in his secret network.
So what I want you guys to do is write down below what are a couple of names that you haven't heard yet online that you would assume and think might be associated with the Epstein files, even though you have yet to watch this video.
The first is not a politician, not a CEO, but a magician, David Copperfield. Perhaps he wasn't your first guess, but David Copperfield certainly isn't a stranger to controversy. In 2007, he made headlines after being accused of essaying a woman named Lacey L. Carroll. She claimed that Copperfield had lured her to his private Caribbean island under the false pretense of helping her jumpstart a modeling career. And
does that not sound shockingly similar to everything that goes on Epstein Island, luring them to your private island to jumpstart their career? That's great. I wonder if he took inspiration.
Then assaulted her. A federal investigation was conducted for 2 years until early 2010 when the case was dropped by the courts. Copperfield not only proclaimed that the allegations were false, but that he was actually the victim.
Finally, things, come to light. Unfortunately, in the press, what happens is
people remember the charge, they don't remember the exoneration.
Exactly. Not only exoneration, but I was the victim.
Throughout
it's actually disgusting to me to see her, Oprah Winfrey, there trying to get his word out about being an innocent person, because she is one of the darkest in this entire ring itself.
2004 and 2005, David had left 16 different messages for Epstein, indicating that the two had a close personal relationship. In one message, he even affectionately referred to himself as Magic David. Legal representatives for Copperfield denied he ever personally reached out to Jeffrey. Any messages that were left would have been left by our client's office in response to a request by Epstein for tickets to a show. On top of that, they made it clear that Copperfield was not a friend of Jeffrey Epstein. However, the recent file dump paints a much different picture. It is true that Epstein frequently purchased tickets for David Copperfield's shows. However, it's also made clear that the two had a close personal relationship, with Copperfield being directly referred to as a friend of Jeffrey's. However, this was just the tip of the iceberg, as the details of Copperfield's 2007 investigation found their way into the released Epstein files. During the investigation, multiple alleged victims and witnesses were interviewed by the FBI. After Jeffrey Epstein's name was mentioned, the FBI wanted to see if the two had a criminal relationship. It reads, "A review of the evidence seized from search warrants executed on Copperfield's residence, warehouse, and at the MGM Grand Hollywood Theater where he performs, show a number of other occasions when he provided complimentary tickets to Epstein and his guests."
I'll tell you what makes someone seem guilty is when they say something like, I had no friendship, I had no relationship, I really barely knew Jeffrey Epstein, and then things like this come out that are basically showing the opposite. You're not giving free tickets, complimentary things to people that aren't in some type of a relationship with you, whether that's a friendship or something more. So really the dishonesty is what leads me to believe that Copperfield here is guilty.
Epstein's name and information is contained within Copperfield's personal telephone list. A clear connection between Copperfield and Epstein exists that requires further investigation to determine if they both shared a predilection for minors. In addition, the investigation needs to determine if they engage in referring possible victims to each other. Shortly after his name was revealed to be in the files, The Guardian published an article revealing that 16 different women had accused him of SA over the span of nearly 4 decades. More than half are alleged alleged to have been teenagers, with one of them being as young as 15 years old. One of the girls supposedly was also a victim of Epstein and claimed that Copperfield asked if she was, quote, aware that girls were getting paid to find other girls for Epstein. If this was true, that would heavily imply that David was well aware of the trafficking operation and was potentially a part of it. But David vehemently denies any wrongdoing. His lawyer said, "Our client did not know about Epstein's horrific crimes. Like the rest of the world, he learned about it from the press. But when people saw this photo of Copperfield..."
Wow, that right there. Pretty telling of what's going on. Crazy image right there. Looks like they had some kind of relationship.
Cozied up in a bathroom robe, hugging on Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey's second in command, they doubted that David had no idea what was going on. Additionally, an FBI memo sent from an agent who investigated Copperfield in 2007 claimed that he and Epstein had a, quote, very close relationship. In August of 2007, the Seattle FBI opened an investigation on David Copperfield in a relationship to a R-word of a young female. The investigation showed that Copperfield trained his employees to identify young females, teens to early 20s, in the audience of his shows. The females were separated from their boyfriends, families, and husbands and were brought backstage. Copperfield's employees were given access to a notebook that instructed them on how to provide Copperfield with females. He kept a notebook with the females he was with, included in the notebook that contained contact information, whether he had sex with them, and a photograph. I don't know if any of his victims were underage. There were allegations that he drugged some of the females.
What we wouldn't give right now to actually see that little book that he has. That's disgusting. Literally trying to pull people from their boyfriends and husbands to get them backstage to X with them. That's crazy.
Considering Copperfield's history of allegations, the multiple FBI investigations on him, and the fact that he seems to have blatantly lied about his ties to Epstein, David Copperfield finds himself at the center of a PR nightmare. And in spite of his expertise as a world-famous illusionist, there's nothing he can do to make this scandal disappear. But if you thought Epstein rubbing shoulders with magicians was weird, you'll be suspicious of his relationship with NASCAR driver Brian Vickers. In 2015, Brian married a woman named Sarah Kellen, who is accused of assisting Epstein in his ex-trafficking operation all the way back to 2003. Sarah's name can be found multiple times inside of Jeffrey Epstein's 2008 indictment, where she was listed as a co-conspirator. When Epstein was arrested a second time in 2019, her name began making the rounds in articles discussing the many behind-the-scenes faces who kept his operation afloat. Sarah publicly challenged the narrative that she played a part in Epstein's trafficking ring, actually framing herself as a victim of his, and claimed to have been frequently subjected to abuse at his hands. However, the filings tell a different story.
I'll tell you, it's crazy because there are so many people, so many names that are implicated in anything relating to Epstein. There's going to be, like this woman, I'm not very familiar with her. I don't know much about her, but it's crazy that there are so many more people that are just like this, ones that we've never heard of. And I'm glad that we're exposing some that have been unreleased yet.
Sarah was found to have scheduled flights for Epstein and his victims, as well as facilitating those same victims to perform massages for Epstein. One victim, under the pseudonym of Carolyn, alleged that Kellen took nude photos of her when she was underage. Sarah Kellen is accused of serving as Ghislaine Maxwell's second-in-command, taking over many of her responsibilities and directly facilitating the abuse of countless numbers of victims. By the time Brian Vickers married Sarah, she had allegedly moved on from her role in the operation, avoiding jail time as a part of Epstein's non-prosecution agreement, cutting her losses, and starting off a new life as an interior designer.
You have to wonder if he knew about his now wife's past. Is that like a secret that he never understood and never heard of before? Or is it something that he heard of and she's like, I've moved on, I'm a new person now, and he was just accepting of that? Because that's something that's very hard to accept, in my opinion.
However, the ties to Epstein don't stop there. Brian also had a personal relationship with the Predator, which both predates and overlaps with his marriage to Sarah. In 2012, Brian forwarded an email to Epstein titled Male Fairy Tale, which I recommend that you pause and read because it is hilariously pathetic.
Let's read that. Let's actually pause and read that right now as recommended. Once upon a time, a prince asked a beautiful princess, "Will you marry me?" The princess said no, and the prince lived happily ever after and rode motorcycles and F skinny big T broads and hunted and raced cars and went to N bars and dated women half his age and drank whiskey, beer, and Captain. You can already tell where this is going. It's a stupid fairy tale theme that's inappropriate and not talking about women in a positive light.
Fairy tale, which I recommend that you pause and read because it is hilariously pathetic. But since the email itself is romantically graphic, it indicates that Brian and Epstein were close enough to discuss these explicit subjects. The recent file dump also shows a prenuptial agreement for Brian Vickers and an unnamed spouse.
All right, so it says it right there. I said a moment ago, did he know about his wife's wrongdoing and connection with Epstein? And from what we're seeing right now, specifically that fairy tale, it seems that he actually very much did know his wife and potentially even met her through Epstein and all of these things that are going on.
We can assume the spouse is likely Sarah Kellen because Epstein also sent an email to a Sarah K that says, "Is you prenup not finished? Anything you want me to do?" Brian's name shows up in various other places in the files. In one email, Brian inquires about potentially meeting up to go bowling together, and others show mortgage loans taken out in his name. However, one of the most troubling emails comes from as recently as 2019, when Brian sent Jeffrey Epstein a video for Valentine's Day. It reads, "Thought you would like this. Happy Valentine's, buddy. Winky face." It's uncertain what this video is, but considering it was Valentine's Day and the two had actually explicit conversations before, in addition to their friendship and ties spanning nearly 2 decades, people are assuming the worst.
Really curious as to what was actually on that video.
The NASCAR driver's personal relationship with Epstein, along with his wife's history as being an integral piece of the ex-trafficking operation, leaves more questions about their marriage than
How do you marry someone like that? Even if you are deeply involved in the Epstein stuff, how do you marry a woman that was also deeply involved, that was doing the things herself and bringing other women into it? It really just seems, it just doesn't seem like someone that you'd want to marry. Not that he's innocent in any way, because he is probably just as guilty as her and they're probably equally disgusting. So actually, maybe they just deserve one another.
Answers, and the two notably divorced in 2025.
There you go.
A couple of weeks ago, Brian randomly posted a selfie to Twitter while fans begged him to address his obvious ties to Epstein. But if you thought it was shocking that Jeffrey Epstein's network expanded into professional sports athletes, it actually gets crazier.
So we have a magician and we have a NASCAR driver. There's others that I've heard of that are in, my region. So for example, I'm a big New York Giants fan. I love the Giants. And now we're hearing that the management and ownership of the Giants are actually in the Epstein files as well. I doubt that's going to be inside of this video, but we'll take a look and see.
As he was also connected to owners of professional sports teams,
maybe?
like Steve Tisch, owner of the New York
That's actually really funny because I haven't previewed this, and well, there you go. He pulled it out.
Giants. Emails reveal Tisch had a close relationship with Epstein, as the two frequently met up for Giants games and even personal meetups at his home.
Wow.
They also had personal discussions about redacted women, such as this email titled "Ukrainian Girl." Tisch writes, "Hi Jeffrey, I just had lunch with your assistant's friend, redacted. Very sweet girl. Do you know anything about her? Thanks."
Keep in mind, Epstein did have a home in New York, so going to New York sporting events would build those relationships with the ownership of those teams, since he was very good at getting himself involved with people in the higher of societies, the rich.
Thanks, Steve. Epstein responds,
Wow.
"No, but I will ask, all confidential. I will get all info. Did you contact the great ass fake tit redacted? She's a character. Short term. Has an older boyfriend going to acting school. A 10 ass. I'm happy to have you as a new, but obviously shared interest friend." Steve Tisch then asks if the girl is a professional ex-worker or a regular civilian, to which Epstein cryptically responds, "Send me a number to call. I don't like records of these conversations," only for Epstein to report back to Tisch, "You did very well. She wants to go to the play. She is a little freaked out by the age difference, but go slow and wait. I will try to convince her not to return to Ukraine. Having her crying worked." If Epstein was concerned about records of this conversation, many are assuming that the two men were discussing some sort of illegal activity. And with Epstein's track record, it's hard to imagine they're simply discussing consenting adult workers. Another email correspondence shows Epstein trying to connect Steve to more girls. Steve asks if he can expect any trouble. Epstein suggests inviting a Russian girl and gives Steve's her contact information. One conversation shows Epstein mentioning that he has a new present for Steve.
New York Giants are screwed.
And asks for a time to meet for lunch. Steve asks, "Is my present in New York City? And can I get my surprise to take to lunch tomorrow?" While the two are attempting to speak in coded language, it's hard to see this as anything other than discussing a human being, specifically a girl. We also see a correspondence between Steve and an anonymous girl. "Hi, redacted. How are you today? Jeffrey Epstein is very excited about you and I meeting each other. I like that idea. Do you?" After not hearing back from the girl, Steve forwarded the email chain to Epstein, informing him that the girl he had set her up with had fallen through. Not only were Steve and Epstein close, it was very clear that their relationship was heavily predicated around Jeffrey introducing him to much younger women. Now, there is no direct confirmation that any of these girls were under the age of consent, which is a fact that Steve used to his advantage in his official response. We had a brief association where we exchanged emails about adult women, and in addition, we discussed movies, philanthropy, and investments.
Okay, that's a good point right there. There is nothing regarding anyone being underaged. And when you think about the girl, her boyfriend was in school for acting. She was probably of age, the Ukraine girl, based off of what we were reading. Of course, that's not confirmed. But it is true that there may not be an underage issue here. There's definitely a moral, ethical thing going on here as well as some type of a prostitution thing going on here. But yeah, we'll see.
I did not take him up on any of his invitations and never went to his island. As we all know, he was a terrible person and someone I deeply regret associating with.
He was a terrible person, yet he still would interact with him in multiple emails back and forth. Plus, in other areas of conversation that were not even here in the emails.
Most of the women discussed in these emails appear to be college students. As you can see, Epstein writing things like, "Oh, she's still in class." However, the possibility of other individuals being underage is not entirely off the table. Steve claims to not have been aware of the terrible person that Epstein was, yet most of his interactions take place well after Jeffrey was imprisoned in 2008, leaving many to speculate that more sinister behavior lies beneath the surface. Now, I have to mention that not everyone found in the Epstein files is inherently guilty of wrongdoing, and even some found themselves in headlines for what appears to be a complete misunderstanding, such as the legendary professional skateboarder Tony Hawk.
Yeah, Tony Hawk. I saw his face pic pop in the beginning of the video. I haven't heard about any implications of him. Let's see why he was in the files.
Tony Hawk has been a frequent target of tabloids, as his 3 divorces in 20 years was perfect for gossip and unfounded rumors in the media. After the release of the Epstein files, people were shocked to see his love life has become the subject of media attention once again. An email sent by a threat intake officer at the FBI details an anonymous tip provided by an anonymous victim of Jeffrey Epstein. The girl claims to have been abducted at the age of 5 and was trafficked for 8 years straight, enduring unspeakable crimes at the hands of various powerful men. At age 13, she found herself on Little St. James Island and supposedly witnessed Tony Hawk getting married to one of his wives during her time on Epstein's island. Images of Tony's 2006 wedding ceremony were discovered, visibly taking place on a tropical island with beaches and palm trees.
I did not know, and I don't know if this is confirmed, that Tony Hawk got married on Epstein Island. Could that be?
Plus, the photographer credited for capturing the ceremony was a man named Mark Epstein, coincidentally the same name of Jeffrey Epstein's brother. For many, this was all the proof they needed for the allegations to be credible. However, others see this whole thing as a misunderstanding. The wedding from 2006 was actually held in Fiji, thousands of miles away from Little St. James.
Okay, so there's the fact that it was not actually on Epstein Island.
And the Mark Epstein who photographed the event has no blood relation to the infamous human trafficker. Tony Hawk personally clarified in a post made to his Instagram that his first 2 weddings were held in California, his third in Fiji, and his most recent in 2015 was at the Adair Manor in Limerick, Ireland.
That's actually kind of crazy, like listing out where your first, second, and third marriages all took place. But it does seem that Tony Hawk is not implicated in any negative way with Epstein. It was just coincidences.
a prestigious 5-star luxury hotel.
Wow.
The key to solving this mix-up is written in this report. She flew to Ireland for politicians and notable men. They would have sex with the young woman, and she was taken from Ireland and brought to Jeffrey Epstein's island when she was 13 years old. It's likely that the powerful men took advantage of the young girl during her stay at the hotel in Ireland, which happened to be at the exact same time that Tony Hawk was being married, and she potentially witnessed the wedding ceremony when it occurred. But since she was immediately taken to Epstein's island right after, she potentially mixed up the two events since they were in such close proximity to each other. Plus, she submitted this report 10 years after this happened. It's extremely common for victims of prolonged abuse to misremember key details, especially considering she was a child. And while Tony Hawk's situation seems to be a misunderstanding, Woody Allen's connections to Epstein are far more suspicious.
Yeah, we've known Woody Allen has been heavily implicated in all this as well. I guess that's where we're going next.
Woody Allen has been controversial long before his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein was revealed. He was the subject of SA allegations by his adopted daughter Dylan Farrow, who claims he had abused her at only 7 years old. These allegations were corroborated by his now ex-wife Mia Farrow, alleging that he had also abused their son Satchel at only 5 years old. These allegations have never been proven accurate in a court of law. However, Woody's behavior with other adoptive children makes them difficult to doubt.
Absolutely disgusting.
In 1997, Woody married Mia Farrow's other adopted daughter, Soon-Yi Previn, who was only 10 years old when she first met the disgraced filmmaker.
How do you do that? How do you meet someone at 10 years old when you're clearly 55 years old or something like that, the way he looks right there, and then end up marrying that person? Strange.
Safe to say, people weren't all too surprised to find out that this guy was rubbing shoulders with the most notorious predator to ever exist. In September of 2025, Allen spoke with The Times where he discussed a dinner event he attended with Epstein in 2010, months after he was released from prison, claiming to be unaware of why Jeffrey was locked up. He told us he'd been in jail and that he had been, I can't remember the word, but that he'd been falsely put in jail in some way. But even after learning the full truth, he still went on to describe Epstein as charming and personable. Woody seemed to be entirely unfazed that his friend was a predator, and when asked if he regretted his frequent visits to his home, he said, "Well, I'm a writer, so I don't get put off. Those dinners were fascinating, and when it was all uncovered, it becomes interesting to a writer."
Why were they fascinating? I mean, there was definitely fascinating things that were going on there, fascinatingly disgusting and illegal.
Because then you're dealing with a kind of nefarious character on your doorstep. So basically, he thought Jeffrey was an interesting character for a story instead of what he actually was, a horrible, disgusting criminal. Hundreds of pages of text conversations between Allen and Epstein have been made public. Some show the two setting up dinner plans, and others show discussions about an article that was released talking about his alleged assaults on his stepchildren. Emails between Epstein and Woody's wife, Soon-Yi, show Epstein referring to Woody's scandal as a witch hunt. He writes, "Have to be careful. The crowd needs a witch to burn, and there are not many left." It also appears that Epstein pulled a few favors for Allen. In one text message, we see Woody thanking him for supposedly assisting his daughter in getting accepted to Bard College. President of Bard, Leon Botstein, rejected Epstein's involvement in her acceptance, calling him a serial liar who apparently took credit for the sun rising each day. Epstein also seemed to take credit for facilitating a tour of the White House for Woody and his wife in 2015, with the help of former White House counsel Kathy Rumler. While there doesn't appear to be any direct evidence of them.
Look at how he's holding her arm right there. Look at that. That is not a loving way to hold on to your wife, your lover. That is a controlling way to hold on to someone.
Committing crimes together, Woody Allen's personal scandals and him clearly being friends with Epstein don't make him look any less guilty. And what you'll notice is that Epstein frequently associated with men who had their own ex-scandals, such as Brett Ratner. Brett Ratner is best known for his role as director of the Rush Hour trilogy.
Oh God, and look who's in there with him. Wow.
However, he most recently got attention as the director of Melania, a documentary following the life of the First Lady, Melania Trump. Pictures released by the Department of Justice show Ratner, Epstein, and two anonymous women all cozied up together, Ratner sporting a devious and unsettling look on his face. He responded to the photos immediately. "About 20 years ago, I had a girlfriend. I was in love with her. We were engaged. She was my fiance. We went to an event and we were sitting on the couch and the photo was taken at that event. I didn't have a personal relationship with him, I didn't know him, and that's where the picture was taken. I didn't even remember, because I'd been asked in the past, do you know him? And I'm like, I don't think so, because I didn't have a personal relationship with him. While Brett chalks up the photo to a chance encounter, it appears to be far from the case.
Wait a
An email
second.
from
Wait a
2012.
second. Let's go back to that picture very quickly here. Look at how the fiance that he says is holding on to Epstein there as well. It's not like they're sitting next to one another in a booth. She is literally arm on top of Epstein. They are like snuggling up right there. So it's kind of hard to believe that they didn't have some type of relationship or not even know him.
To be far from the case. In an email from 2012, a woman named Peggy said to Jeffrey Epstein, sitting next to Brett Ratner, he produced Woody's 3-hour documentary that was just shown at Cannes. We are about to see the Roman Polanski documentary. Brett says hi and he loves you. We also see emails sent to Ratner directly, in which Epstein is trying to call him about something that has been redacted. Epstein also discussed Ratner's contact information with one of his aides, Leslie Groff, establishing a line of connection between the two. The two seemed to remain close throughout the 2010s, as a meeting with Brett Ratner was found in Epstein's personal calendar in 2018. However, Ratner continues to claim that he never spoke to Epstein before or after the image was taken.
And I was never been in contact with Jeffrey Epstein before that photo, and I was never in contact with him after. So that's a picture of me and my fiance at some event.
Ratner's history certainly doesn't make him look any better. In 2017, he was accused of SA by 6 different women, as well as sexual harassment from an 18-year-old Elliot Page. Epstein certainly had a vested interest in associating with large names in the entertainment industry, but he also cared deeply about keeping close ties to those in the world of science and philosophy, such as Noam Chomsky.
Doing a great job exposing some names here that we haven't seen before.
2023, Epstein's calendar became publicly available, revealing a scheduled meeting between himself and Noam Chomsky. When asked about his relationship with Epstein by the Wall Street Journal, Chomsky said in an email, "First response is that it is none of your business, or anyone's. Second is that I knew him and we met occasionally." This statement indicates that they were acquaintances at best. However, Noam himself has gone on record to clarify that they were much more than that. In a letter of support for Epstein, Noam writes, "The impact of Jeffrey's limitless curiosity, extensive knowledge, penetrating insights, and thoughtful appraisals is only heightened by his easy informality, without a trace of pretentiousness. He quickly became a highly valued friend and regular source of intellectual exchange and stimulation." Emails show Epstein inviting Noam and his wife to hang out together. "Enjoyed today as always. Come to New York or the Caribbean?" Noam writes, "Valeria's always keen on New York. I'm really fantasizing about the Caribbean island. I have to figure out a way to work clear of endless commitments." His wife, Valeria, also directly communicated with Epstein, apologizing for missing his birthday and promising to have their own personal celebration the next time they meet up. However, Valeria has now publicly come out to defend herself and her husband, who is recovering from a stroke suffered in 2023. "Noam and I recognize the gravity of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes and the profound suffering of his victims. Nothing in this statement is intended to minimize that suffering, and we express our unrestricted solidarity with the victims." She explains that they were unaware of his previous conviction of soliciting a child for and were introduced to him as a philanthropist supporting science and a financial expert. Supposedly, Epstein encircled Noam with frequent gifts and opportunities to connect with high-profile individuals for conversations. However, Noam had spoken with Epstein about his poor reputation only months before he was arrested in 2019. "I'd love your advice on how I handle my putrid press. It is spiraling out of control. Do I have someone write an op-ed, defend myself, or try to ignore it?" Noam responded with, "The horrible way you are being treated in the press and public. It's painful to say, but I think the best way to proceed is to ignore it. I've had plenty of experience, though of course not on this scale." Valeria claims that Noam was manipulated, and Epstein used him to help repair his reputation through positive association, but she fails to explain the fact that Noam and Epstein were photographed together on his private jet. It's unknown where they were coming from or where they were headed, but people will only assume the worst with surrounding context. But Noam Chomsky was not the only academic to be seen associated.
Oh, such an old guy too. Like there's no limits to the type of person that you could expect to have associated with Epstein in one way or the other.
associating with Epstein, such as the now deceased astrophysicist Stephen Hawking.
This one we've
Stephen
heard.
Hawking's life story served as a source of inspiration. He was living proof that physical limitations could never outwork perseverance and dedication. However, his reputation has since been destroyed as his name being associated with Jeffrey Epstein.
I've also heard people discuss that maybe he wasn't as genius as everyone had put him up on the pedestal to be. Maybe it was more of a massive success story of someone with such a massive disability having that type of not only intelligence, but ability to do such amazing things. I'm not sure.
It was revealed that Hawking visited Epstein's compound in the U.S. Virgin Islands to attend a conference discussing gravity. It's uncertain if any illicit activity took place during his stay, but there was a connection nonetheless. However, new details were revealed regarding Stephen Hawking in an unsealed email between Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein from 2015. Hawking was accused by Virginia Giuffre, one of the most prominent victims of Epstein's trafficking operation, of participating in an underage orgy. In the email, Epstein is seen discussing with Maxwell about offering a cash reward for any of Virginia's friends or family to disprove the claims. The claims of an orgy involving Hawking only...
I mean, there's an image of it right there. Now, of course, there's nothing happening. He's just there in a bathing suit. It could have been just a posed picture at the pool, but we really don't know.
Exist within this email exchange, and since now Hawking and Giuffre are both deceased, it's uncertain if there will ever be clarification regarding this allegation. The deeper we get into the list of names, the more vague and cryptic the stories become. The lack of concrete evidence is good for those involved, however, with less information, there is more room for speculation, and there are various names that have popped up with little context surrounding their involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. The most notable of these individuals is Michael Jackson, who was photographed with Epstein. The King of Pop has a long history of scandals involving his relationship with young children. While he has never been formally proven of any misconduct, theories regarding his propensities still remain a topic of discussion to this day.
People have talked about this, saying that Michael Jackson had his Neverland Ranch and would take children to Neverland Ranch to escape Epstein. He was actually saving people from Epstein. Now, of course, that's just speculation. And when you talk to any of the children, Macaulay Culkin and more, that were children that had been at his ranch, you don't hear anyone saying that any wrongdoing had been done by Michael Jackson. Sure, it's strange that a grown man would have many different children come to his ranch and he'd hang out with young children. Definitely strange. But we're talking about Michael Jackson, who is strange in himself, amazing artist, but definitely a unique person that beats to his own drum.
And discourse began swirling once again with the release of this image. By all accounts, Michael Jackson's affiliation with Epstein appears to be extremely minimal. This singular photograph was taken during a film festival in Palm Beach, and Jackson was supposedly house hunting in the area when Epstein asked for a photo. One of Epstein's victims claims to have met Jackson in Epstein's mansion in Palm Beach, however stated that there was no wrongdoing to speak of.
That could also be very true. Michael Jackson, massive celebrity. Can I get a picture with you? Take the shot. If there's only one picture, it could be part of that as well. Justin Bieber, someone else we've spoken about so much, the unfortunate recipient of crime from Diddy and Epstein.
Justin Bieber is briefly mentioned in an email from a woman named Peggy Segal, who claims she attempted to set up a 17-year-old Bieber with a 14-year-old Haley Steinfeld. Epstein took a particular interest in Justin, especially during his run-ins with the legal system. Justin Bieber also hired one of Epstein's attorneys for one of his DUI trials, leaving a vague but present connection between the two. Handfuls of other celebrities were seen photographed with Epstein, such as the lead singer of the Rolling Stones, Mick Jagger, and actor and comedian Chris Tucker.
Yeah, we've been seeing a lot more about Chris Tucker being there, but not much depth as we're hearing right here.
Who explained that he had no idea who Epstein was, but was on his plane.
That was a humanitarian trip to Africa. I met him on that trip because it was his plane. I didn't know who plane we was getting on, but it was a whole bunch of dignitary people. We was with a delegation. Yeah, I met him, and you don't know people, what they do in their private lives, so.
That's true as well. I think that was the same trip that Hillary Clinton was talking about regarding Bill Clinton being on that trip to Africa.
This would explain why Chris Tucker was photographed with Ghislaine Maxwell. However, there are some more emails that indicate a potential closer relationship with Epstein. It reads, Chris Tucker will be stopping by to see J.E. sometime before his show tonight. No exact time was given. And Chris Tucker called to say he will be in New York this Monday and wondered if you could do dinner. While his humanitarian trip to Africa took place in 2002, years before Epstein was even convicted, these emails were sent after his 2008 sentencing, meaning
Chris Tucker called to say he'll be in New York this Monday and wondered if you could do dinner on 2013, so definitely after 2008 by far. So it looks like he did know.
The two remained in contact after the fact. Other surprising names were found in the files, such as Leonardo DiCaprio.
Is that surprising though? We've been hearing a lot about him.
Cameron Diaz, and Bruce Willis. According to witness testimony, Epstein would frequently brag to his victims about being friends with high-profile celebrities, despite never meeting them personally. Leonardo DiCaprio seemed to attend dinners hosted by Epstein on multiple occasions. In spite of this, DiCaprio denied ever associating with Epstein in 2024. Other names like Cameron Diaz and Bruce Willis are far less certain, as they only appear in witness testimony as names that Epstein would brag about knowing. Heavyweight rappers like Jay-Z and Pusha T found themselves in the files for the same reason, witness testimony, although they are more directly accused of committing crimes.
Yeah, I mean, we know that Jay-Z was apparently filming videos, music videos, on the island with underage women, and also, I believe, women had woken up in a room with Jay-Z and Harvey Weinstein.
An anonymous tip given to the FBI alleged that a woman was frequently abducted and drugged, and claims that on one occasion she awoke in the presence of Harvey Weinstein and Sean Carter, aka Jay-Z, while Weinstein inserted his fingers into Redacted. Redacted believed she was in Epstein's mansion in Florida. The report also alleges that Weinstein and Pusha T also attended the party and drugged her before engaging in abuse. However, considering this is an anonymous tip with very little factual information given to be able to cross-reference, it's hard to confirm. And surprisingly, considering Harvey Weinstein's history of allegations, this is one of the only places he is found in the files.
We also know that Harvey Weinstein was an absolutely disgrace of a human as well, abusing women regularly, whether it had to do relating to Epstein or his own circles.
Many demanded the Epstein files be released in hopes of receiving clarity, but it seems that all that's been revealed has only given us more questions that are left unanswered. One of the most cryptic discoveries in the files is a screenshot of a missed call from Rihanna. Is this the world-renowned pop star? And if so, who was she calling? What does this screenshot do other than distract us and leave tons of room for speculation?
Some names you probably didn't expect came up inside of this one. Are you surprised, or are these ones that you've considered before that may have been up to some wrongdoing with Jeffrey Epstein?